I want to thank you for joining today. This is Evan McLaughlin. I'm the Content Marketing Specialist at Minitab. I want to thank you for joining our webinar series, Minitab Needs and Knows. This is the first part in our series, Minitab Need to Know 1, Managing Data in Minitab. We're hoping we can help you get started processing your data with fewer clicks and mistakes and getting better insights when you go to interpret your results. If you're just joining, I want to put out a few housekeeping notes for everybody. So this webinar is being recorded, and we're going to send you the presentation and the recording in the next few days after the webinar is over. If you need to drop off or if you want to review anything later, please look out for the email containing those slides of the presentation and the recording in your inbox. Also, you'll see on the right-hand side, there is a questions pane. Please go ahead and enter any questions you have at any time in that questions pane. Myself and my colleague, Silvana, will be answering those throughout the webinar. And also Quentin, our presenter, at the end will have time for to answer a few of those questions on the line as well. And finally, just to make this a little bit interactive, I wanted to let everybody know we have a few polls throughout the webinar. So please go ahead and answer those when you see them come across the screen. They'll help us guide the conversation for you. And when the webinar is over, you'll see an exit survey pop up as well. So it's just about 5 or 6 questions letting us know if you are interested in learning more, or if you'd like to share some of your feedback about the webinar or your interest in products. We appreciate it if you take a few minutes to answer those questions. All right. So for those of you who are not familiar with us, I wanted to say a few words about Minitab. For over 40 years, Minitab has been a leading provider of quality improvement and statistical analysis software. Over 90% of Fortune 100 companies use Minitab software to improve their products and their processes. Some distinguished companies and organizations that rely on Minitab software and services include Ford, the Army's Lean Six Sigma program, Bridgestone, and Xerox. And we're also showing some companies across the screen here. You can see case studies on minitab.com detailing these and several other companies we work with as well. Now, to go over our products and services, Minitab statistical software, which you'll learn more about in this webinar series, has been used in implementing countless improvement initiatives around the world. Companioned by Minitab is a continuous improvement project management software. We also have Quality Trainer, an online statistics teacher with animated lessons and hands-on exercises, and SPM, Salford Predictive Modeler, our platform for data mining and predictive analytics. In the services area, we offer training year-round, and you can also bring a Minitab trainer to your company to teach your staff. We also offer statistical consulting. You can learn more about that at minitab.com/services. We'd also encourage you to look at our support section. We have world-class support available online and by phone. You can find links to our blog there and our additional webinars, both that are coming up live like this one and on-demand webinars in the past. And now, introduce our presenter for today, Quentin Brook. He is the author of the best-selling Lean Six Sigma and Minitab. Quentin developed his experience of process improvement and statistical quality tools in the automotive industry of Detroit and the aerospace industry in the UK. He trained in Six Sigma with General Electric aircraft engines in Cincinnati, Ohio, before becoming managing director of OPEX Resources, where he helps a broad range of clients deploy continuous improvement initiatives in a wide range of industries. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Quentin.
Okay. Thank you, Evan. Let me just move on to the next slide here. Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking the time today to watch this webinar. As Evan explained, today is the first in a series of webinars titled Minitab Need to Knows. And the aim of this series is to provide you with some essential Minitab need-to-knows so that you can feel more confident with Minitab and get some useful ideas for analyzing your own data. So today is all about managing your data in Minitab. The second webinar on the 13th of June will explore first steps for analyzing data. And then the final webinar on the 11th of July will provide an introduction to process capability. Okay, so on to today. As I just mentioned, today is all about managing data. In other words, how you get your data into Minitab and how you prepare it for analysis. The webinar is divided into 4 sections as shown here. So first of all, we're going to look at importing data into Minitab, and we're going to cover how to import it from different types of files and formatting data. Then we're going to look at how you structure data for analysis, including some stacking, sorting, checking, and finding. Then the third section is about making more data if you need it. So there are some calculator and formula functions in Minitab, and you can also extract numeric and text information from other columns. So we're going to look at that. And finally, we're going to look at working with groups of data in Minitab, which is quite a common situation. We're going to look at how you can do that and how you can include or exclude particular groups from your graphs and how to make subset worksheets. So the first section that we're going to look at is the importing data into Minitab. Okay, well, before we start that, I'd actually like to ask you a question via a poll. And the poll question is, how do you get your data into Minitab? So if you could take a look at the answers that are on your screen, and I'll leave you for a few seconds just to read through those and to choose the one that most represents how you get data into Minitab. Okay, great. That poll is now closed. And as you can see from the results, it's pretty overwhelming that most of you, 86%, you cut and paste your data from other programs like Excel into Minitab. And that's interesting. We're going to look at some other ways of bringing data straight in from other programs, but it tells us that the most common source of your data is another function or another type of format, and that the most obvious way that you do that is to cut and copy and paste. So great, thank you, that's useful. So we're going to look at a different method to do that in a few seconds. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to switch to Minitab. And here we have a blank worksheet waiting for some data. Now, also before we go ahead and import some data into this worksheet, it's probably worth pointing out that Minitab worksheets have quite a distinct format. So Minitab works in columns, and the first row of its worksheets here is reserved for the names of the columns, as you can see. So the row numbers actually start below here. And it's important to be aware of this when you're importing data or cutting and pasting into Minitab, because it's quite a specific format, and very often the source data will not be exactly how you need it. Okay, so let's go ahead and get some data into Minitab. And at this point, I'm going to switch to an Excel file that has some data in it. Now, this data is pretty typical. It's actually contains the fuel costs and mileage completed for some vehicles in a company's fleet. And I'm just going to run through the individual columns, but here we have the vehicle type, either a car or a truck. Then we have a column of the year period, and in this case, it was all from September 17. Then we have the fuel costs and the total fuel costs year to date for each vehicle. And then finally, the miles completed by each vehicle and the total mileage year to date completed by each vehicle. So, as most of you would do, the simplest way to get this data into Minitab is to copy and paste it like this. Now I'm going to paste it into the top row because I know that I had column headings. Okay, now I'm going to point out a couple of things. First of all, you'll notice that this column here has been renamed slightly. It's now total year to date _1. And that's because Minitab identifies its columns by their names, and you can't have duplicate names. So it was the same as total year to date here, so it's added a suffix. Now also note that if I had copied and pasted the columns instead from Excel, and I'm going to paste them here, now Minitab has gone ahead and ignored correctly the first few rows that were empty in the Excel file. So it's pretty good at importing data and understanding what you're trying to do. I'm just going to delete those columns. I don't need them for now. Now another thing to notice when you cut and paste data into Minitab is that Minitab will try and identify the data and assign one of its 3 broad data types to each column. So for our data, well, all the costs and the miles data here, they've all been identified as numeric data columns. And numeric data columns don't have a suffix in Minitab, they're just standard. However, the year period column has been identified as date, and therefore Minitab has put a suffix D after the column number at the top, so it's now C2-D. And finally, the vehicle type has been identified correctly as text, and that now has a suffix T after the column number. So it's important to ensure that Minitab has identified your data type correctly at this stage and to fix any issues. Because if it's got the wrong data type assigned to it, you might not be able to choose the columns that you expect to see when you're creating a graph or doing other things. Now, if you need to, you can change the data type by using the change data type function, which is in the data menu. So you go to data, change data type, and you put the column in that you want to change, and you assign the type of data that you want to assign to that column. But in this case, it's correctly identified our columns and we don't need to. Now you might also notice that Minitab has kept the currency format of the fuel cost columns. So these are numeric, but they're also being identified as currency. And that's because Minitab allows more specific formatting than just the 3 broad categories I've mentioned already. And you can adjust this specific formatting by right-clicking on a column, like that, and then selecting the format column. So if it's not displayed in the way you want, you can change it. So in this case, it's identified the currency and the pound symbol and gone to 2 decimal places, which is correct. But you can see an awful lot of other options for different types of data. So as you can see so far, Minitab's pretty good at helping you import data in the right way, but like a lot of things, you shouldn't just assume that it's going to do it correctly. You need to understand it and to keep an eye on it as you copy and paste your data in. Okay, so the copy and paste method is nice and easy and works well when you have a small amount of data. But if you've got a lot of data to import and it's stored in an Excel file, instead of copying and pasting, you can actually open that Excel file directly into Minitab. And that's what, in the poll, a few of you indicated you did already, but I'd like to show you this so that perhaps more of you can use this option. So let's take a look at another data file. This one's got a whole lot more data. And it's pretty much a bit more realistic of the type of data file you'd find in real life. And this example data file contains real data, but with any confidential elements removed. It represents the records of customer problems and inquiries coming into a customer service department of an industrial supplier. So the first column is the issue ID that was assigned to it when it came in. Then we have some country information about where that problem got reported from. Then we have some date columns around when it got started, when it got resolved, and when it got closed. And finally, we've got a couple of columns about the problem type category that was assigned to that problem and the resolution category that was assigned to that problem. Okay, now you'll also notice that down the bottom here, we've actually got different months data in different tabs in Excel. Okay, so we've got a whole lot of data, and at the moment they're in separate tabs for separate months. Because of the amount of data here, it's worth opening this this Excel file directly into Minitab. If you were to copy and paste this, you could be there for a while, and you could miss some data or make some mistakes. So I'm going to switch over to Minitab. Now I'm going to go and clear what I've got so far. So I'm just going to say new project, and I don't want to save that. So I have a blank project. Now I'm going to go to File, Open, and I'm going to open the data file that we just saw. Now this is an Excel file, but Minitab is showing it to you as an option when you go to File, Open, because it will accept Excel files directly into Minitab. So you can click OK or Open. Oh, sorry, I need to select it first and then Open. Okay, so instead of just dumping that huge data file straight into Minitab, Minitab has actually provided this intermediate screen that helps you see your data and adjust options so that it gets imported in the right way, because this is the point at which you want to get it right. So let's take a closer look at that. Now, the first row to import here enables you to do skip over any blank rows at the top of your data. The last row to import automatically goes to the last row of data in the Excel file, but it could enable you to cut off your data at a particular point. So quite often in Excel, the last row of the data will be the totals, and we don't want the totals in our raw data in Excel, in Minitab. So you could cut the last row off using that. Now you can also select if your raw data has column names at the top or not. So it will decide whether to treat the first item as a column name. And here you can also see and adjust the type of data or the data type that Minitab has recognized and will assign to your data. So there's a drop down here, and it's pre-filled because Minitab has identified the issue ID as plain text. That's pretty correct. The country has been identified as text. That's fine. Now these three start time, close time, and resolve time columns have been identified as date time, and that's also correct. But this is the opportunity to check that it's been recognized properly and to change it if you need to. And finally, both our problem type and resolution type columns have been identified as text as well, and that's fine. Now, if you remember, the data in the Excel file was spread across lots of different worksheets, one for each month. Let's go back and take a quick look at that. So here we are, here are the tabs in Excel. Okay. So coming back to Minitab, Minitab has detected this and will import each separate sheet that it finds in the Excel file into a separate worksheet. And in fact, if you look at the top here, it's produced a tab for each sheet that it found in the Excel file. Okay. So because I know that all of the data sheets are laid out the same, I don't need to go through each one. But in reality, you should check them to make sure they're all going to come into your Minitab data file correctly. And finally, if you want to preview how your data will look once you've imported it, you can do that here as well. So you can click on this option, and it will give you a double check to make sure that you're going to bring it into Minitab correctly and how the data file, the worksheets will look. So that looks okay. So I'm going to click OK. And very rapidly, Minitab brought in all of those sheets from Excel. I'm going to use the worksheets folder as a shortcut to show you that here they all are here. So each one has, for each month, it's imported a worksheet. And in fact, it's used the tab names from Excel, February 06, March 06, etc. And it's called the worksheets the same in Excel, in Minitab, I apologize. Okay, so that's good. We've got the data into Minitab. Before we move on, I'd like to just have a couple of things to note. So first of all, it doesn't have to be an Excel file. Quite often large files that have been extracted from a database will be in the generic comma separated value or CSV file format. Well, you can open these directly into Minitab too. You might just need to change the type of data file that you're looking for when you go to File, Open. And secondly, it's worth noting that when you do have source data files that continue to change, then your Minitab data files might become out of date quite quickly. This can be managed manually by importing the data again, but you can also create links between Minitab data files and their source Excel or CSV files so that they update automatically. We're not going to look at that in more detail now, but I wanted to make you aware of the option, and you can find out more information on that through the help function on Minitab. Okay, so that was some ideas for importing data into Minitab, and in particular I hope that that was useful to take a look at how to bring an Excel file directly into Minitab. We also talked a little bit about the formatting of the data and making sure that Minitab has assigned the correct data type. So moving on, we're going to look at structuring data ready for analysis. So I'm going to go back to Minitab, but before we start, I'd like to conduct our second poll about data preparation. And so the poll question we'd like to ask from you is, how much data preparation do you do, and where? Do you do in Excel or in Minitab or in other areas? So hopefully that poll will be opening quite soon. Now I don't see that opening. So what I'm going to do is carry on, and we can always come back to that, but I'm not able to control the polls from here. Okay, so the first thing, sorry, I'm going to go back. The poll has opened. So how much data preparation do you do and where? I'm going to leave you for a few seconds to check out those answers and tick the one that most applies. Okay, so that poll is closed. Let's take a little look at the results. Hopefully you can see those. I can see that overwhelmingly, again, almost 80% of people do need to do some preparation. It needs some preparation, but you generally do it in other programs, probably the Excel files that you're bringing it in from. So that's useful again, because hopefully I'm going to show you some ideas today for how to go about preparing your data in Minitab, and show you how you can do that if you find that you've got data already in Minitab and you need to adjust it slightly. Okay, thank you for that. That's useful feedback. Okay, so back to, I'm just going to adjust my screen here so I can see what I'm doing. Here we go. So back to the worksheet that we just imported. Now, as we saw, because the Excel file contains several different sheets, from one for each month's results, these have been brought into Minitab as separate worksheets too. From an analysis perspective, these worksheets contain the same data, just for different months. So they should really be in the same worksheet. There's no reason to have the data divided into different months, because it means you might have to complete the same analysis several times for each different month of data in each different worksheet. So fortunately, Minitab's got some useful tools in the data menu, and one of those enables you to stack whole worksheets together, which is exactly what we want to do here. We want to put them all together into one worksheet. So I'm going to go to Data, Stack Worksheets. Sorry, wrong one. Data, Stack Worksheets. And I'm going to work through that with you. So the first thing it says is, what do you want to do? Stack the worksheets in a new worksheet or append them to the bottom of this worksheet? Well, I'm going to stack them in a new worksheet. But then it gives you all the available worksheets here. Now I know that I want to stack all of them up. So I can just double click the double arrows to get them into the worksheets that are going to be stacked. If you just wanted to pick a couple, you could just throw them over individually using the single arrow button. But I can hit the double arrows and they all go over. It's going to stack them all. And what are we going to call the new worksheet? I'm going to call it All Data. And click OK. Okay, so let's go take a look at that. If I go back to the worksheets folder, I can see it's got a new worksheet at the bottom here now called All Data. And if I just adjust my screen again, you can see all of the data here. And notice that Minitab has added a further column here. And that column contains the original sheet name of where that particular row of data came from. So that's pretty useful, and we can see all of February's results first, and then March, April, etc. Okay, so that's it. That's quickly and rapidly stacked a number of worksheets together. And now we have all our data in one place, it would be useful to check that it's in the correct order. If we're going to do any time analysis later on, looking for trends or patterns over time, data has to be time ordered. Now it looks like the data is currently ordered by the start time column. So if I look at this column here, and I should explain that this month and this date information is in the day, month, and year format. So if I look at that, the first one is the 1st of February 2006, which is some time ago. But it does appear to be ordered with all the 1st of February's first, then 2nd, then 3rd, etc. So it appears to be ordered by the start time. And that's fine. But for some analysis, you might want to have the data ordered by the date that things were resolved. Or you might just want to resort this entire worksheet just to double check that it is genuinely ordered by the start time, because we can't scroll through the whole thing and check it manually. Okay, so let's imagine that we want to change this data file so that it is ordered by the resolve time column. So what you can do is go to Data, Sort, and it asks you what you want to do. So I want to sort by the column resolve time, and I want it to be increasing. The columns to be sorted are all of them. And then where do we want to put them? The storage location, well, it's saying at the end of the current worksheet. I don't want to do that. I actually just want to overwrite. So I'm going to put in the original columns. Okay. And then I click OK. And very quickly, Minitab has sorted the entire worksheet based upon column 5, which is the resolved date. And we can see now it starts from the 1st of February, 2nd, 6th, etc. Now, as with many things in Minitab, there's several different ways of doing things. So alternatively, I could have right-clicked on the resolve time column and gone to Sort Columns, and then clicked Entire Worksheet. Now, because I'm already in resolved time column, it assumes I want to order by that column, and I can just choose oldest to newest or newest to oldest. So if I click oldest to newest, it's just going to do the same thing. Shouldn't change anything at all, because that's what we just did. So there are several different ways. You can try right-clicking and using the sort function there, or you can go to Data and use the sort function there. Okay, so we've stacked our data, we've sorted it so that it's in the order that we want. And now, one of the things that I like to do when I've imported some data and I'm getting it ready for analysis is to have a little look at what's in the columns. And I'm not really talking about analyzing the data yet, so much as understanding the type of data that I've actually got in there in a bit more detail. One of the best tools that I find to use for taking a quick look at textual data is actually the Pareto chart. So we're not asking whether there's a Pareto effect going on, we're just using the Pareto chart to show us what are the main results in our text categories. And we've got 3 textual columns here. We've got country, we've got problem type, and we've got resolution type. So I'm going to use the Pareto chart just to take a quick scan of those columns, just to look for any problems. So firstly, the country code. What I'm going to do is go to find the Pareto, which is under Stat, Quality Tools, Pareto. And all you need to do is to throw in the country column, which is C2, so I can identify it and select it, or just double click it. Now, the only other thing I'm going to do here, and again, I'm going quite quickly, but we're not here to explore Pareto charts in a lot of detail, but I'm going to change the Pareto threshold to 99.9 because I want to see as much data as possible. And that's the threshold after which it combines everything else into an other category. And by clicking OK, very quickly, we've got a Pareto chart of the country information, and I can just scan for any issues. Now, straight away, I can see Belgium and the United Kingdom account for most of the source of the problem reports. Spain, Italy, etc. come shortly afterwards, and that's a pretty typical Pareto effect. Again, I'm not here to analyze the Pareto, but what I am noticing is that there are some duplicate entries down here. We have France with all uppercase, France with a capital F, and France with no capitals at all. And the reason that Minitab has identified those as different results is because Minitab is case sensitive. Similarly, if we had misspelt any of the countries in the data, and that quite often happens, misspellings, then all of a sudden you've created another category of results. So Paretos help you to see that sort of thing. Now that's a bit of a problem. We're going to take a look at that in a minute. We need to fix that. We need to get all these France, Germany, and Italy results the same. So we're obviously going to use a find and replace in a minute to sort that problem out. But that's useful for now. So I'm going to minimize that. And before I fix that, I'm just going to check the other two text columns that I have. So I'm going to go to Pareto chart, and I'm going to look at problem type. Oops. Problem type. And just quickly, that looks pretty typical to me. A Pareto effect. I can't see any duplicate entries or misspelt similar entries. So for now, that's all I want to do. I'm not analyzing it, I'm just checking. And similarly, for the resolution type, now there's a lot more resolution type results. That's useful to know, but I can't see any immediate misspellings or duplicate entries of that sort of thing. So back to this problem here. We've got some misspellings of the countries in the data, and we need to fix that. Now again, you could go do that in Excel, but you can do it in Minitab too, so you might as well stay in Minitab and fix it here. Okay, so I'm going to go to the worksheet that we're dealing with, and I'm going to use the Find and Replace tool under the Editor menu. Now you could also, by the way, just right-click the worksheet and find and Replace there, or you could just hit Control F. So again, there's several different ways of doing things. But I'm going to go to Editor, Find and Replace, and then Replace. Now what I need to do is I need to fix any incidence of France, and I'm not going to select to match the case. So any spelling of France in terms of capital or lowercase letters, and I'm going to replace it with uppercase France. And I hit Replace All, and that's done. I can do the same for Germany. Okay, and finally, Italy. Okay, now hopefully that's worked, so let's test it. I'm going to go back to Stat, Quality Tools, Pareto, and I'm going to put in the country, and I'm going to click OK. And this time around, you can see that the raw data has changed because there are no misspelt or wrongly lowercase, uppercase spelt country names. So that's good. We fixed some data in Minitab, we identified it and fixed the problem. Okay, so one other function I'd like you to show you today before we continue on to the next section is Minitab's conditional formatting tool, which can help you scan your data worksheet visually before you analyze it. Now there's lots of things you can do with conditional formatting, but as an example, I'm going to pick out a couple. So the first thing you could do is add a format to highlight any missing data values in your entire worksheet. To do that, you could identify or highlight all the columns you want to do conditional formatting on. Now you could just pick a couple of columns, but I'm going to choose them all. And I'm going to right click, and in this menu you get the option to do conditional formatting. Now as I said, there's lots of things you can do in here, but the top one, highlight cells, I'm going to choose just to highlight cells based upon missing observations. And it asks me what color I'd like to make them. I'm happy with the default red and click OK. Now, there's no red cells yet, but if we scroll down to the bottom of the data, there was one there. You can see it here at the top of my screen. And as we get to the bottom of the data, there's a few more. And particularly at the bottom, there's a few more where those jobs haven't yet to be resolved. So visually, by using conditional formatting, it can really help you see what's going on in your worksheet before you analyze it. Now, as I said, there's lots of things you can do. I'm going to show you one other, which is quite a neat solution. So let's suppose I want to just visually see what the most common result is in my problem type column. And that's a long column of data. But I could go to a cell in the problem type column, and I can right click and apply conditional formatting. Now under the Pareto, it enables me to highlight the most frequent values. Now I only want to know the one most common value, so I'm going to change that from 10 to 1, and I'm going to change it from red to green and click OK. And straight away Minitab has identified what the most common problem type is. It's data accuracy stroke quality. That's the code that is assigned to it. And for every single result in my worksheet, it's just highlighted it as green. So that can be quite a useful function sometimes when you're just scanning through a worksheet looking for clues. Okay, so that was some ideas for structuring data ready for analysis, and hopefully there are some things in there that will help you do more in Minitab in terms of data structuring and preparation. And you don't always need to do that in Excel before you bring the data in. So we've looked at stacking spreadsheets, sorting, checking and finding, and conditional formatting. Okay, sorry, I'm going to the wrong slide there, going backwards. We're going to quickly look now at making more data if needed. So, the most obvious piece of data that we might want to analyze for this data file is the lead time for resolving the problems. And we have start dates, and we have finish dates and resolve dates, but no lead times. So one of the ways we can do that is to create some data using Minitab's calculator function. So I'm going to right click on a column and insert a new fresh column and call it lead time. Okay, then under calculator, I'm going to use Minitab's calculator, and I'm going to store the result in C6, my new column, and I'm going to ask it to use the formula resolve time minus start time. Okay, now by the way, alternatively, I could have applied to do that calculation. I could have right clicked in that column and assigned a formula. So that's down here, and I can assign a formula to that column, and I can do the same calculation, resolve time minus start time. Okay, and if I do it as a formula, it will automatically update if this data changes, and it puts a reminder with a code up here as to what your formula is, and that green tick indicates that the data is up to date. Now the first thing you might notice is from the results is that they're decimal numbers, and we weren't really expecting that from subtracting one date from another. However, by changing the formatting of the relevant columns over here, if I change the formatting of this column by right-clicking and going to Format Column and choosing Date Time, I actually find that there's a timestamp too, and I can do the same on Resolve Time. So this particular job at the beginning was started at 11:46 on the 1st of February and closed shortly after at 12:19. And actually the result that it's calculated is in decimal days, so it's 0.02 decimal days. But why did we miss that data? Well, it's because if I go back to Excel, that's how it was formatted in Excel. It was only formatted to show the date, but if you look at the top here, there was timestamp information too. So it's good to have a look around your data to see what's going on. Now, I don't really use decimal days very often. It would be more useful or more meaningful to have that in decimal hours. So I'm going to do another calculation with another inserted column, and I'm going to call this lead time hours. And I'm going to apply a formula as an example that says that I want it to be the lead time in decimal days times 24. That will give me decimal hours. And there we have it. Okay, so you can create more data using the calculator or formula functions. Now moving on, it's also worth thinking about the type of analysis you might want to do later. So for example, it's quite possible that in order to understand the process better, you might later on want to look at the lead times for jobs that start at different times of the day or different days of the week. And you won't be able to do that very easily unless you have a column of data that contains the start hour or the start day of each week. So what we actually want to do is extract some information from this start time column. So first of all, I'm going to insert a couple of columns. And the first one is going to be the hour of the day. Let's call it the start hour. And the next one is going to be the start day. Now, I can go to data, date time, and under there is extract to numeric. And I can go to say I want to extract from my start time information or column, store the result in C4, my new column. I want to extract the hour of the day, and that's all. Now in Excel this would be a truncate or some sort of function, but in here it's making it a little bit easier to do that. And I'm going to click OK, and there we have it. So that's the hour of the day that it started in, and we could do some analysis around. You could do a histogram on that to see when the results are, the problems are getting reported throughout the day, etc. Now I can do the same by data, date time, extract to text, and I can extract from start time and put it in C5 the day of the week. And quite quickly again, it's given us a column that contains a 3-letter code for the day of the week that problem got started on. So that can be quite useful too if you think later on you're going to want to analyze the results from different days, and you can do it by months or all sorts of things. Okay, so that was some examples of making some more data in Minitab. It's actually quite common to find yourself creating more data from your existing data, either by calculating or extracting, and I hope those examples were useful. Okay, so the final part of this webinar today is about working with groups of data. So I'm just going to go back to Minitab. Very often analysis will be centered around finding different levels of performance within different groups of data. So with our example here, we might want to look at the lead times for the different countries within the data. Now there are several charts that could do that, including box plots and individual value plots. And today, generally I use the individual value plot first because I don't know how much data I've got. So that's the one I'm going to use. So I'm going to analyze lead time by different groups of data, by different countries where they came from. So I'm going to go to Graph, Individual Value Plot. Now, the way it works is that we have to select one Y because our data column is in one column, but we're going to divide it into groups. And click OK. And it asks me which variable I want to graph, which is lead time hours. And I want to divide it by the categorical variable country. And click OK. So there's the individual value plot by different countries. Now you can see there's quite a lot of data in some of these, so much so that the dots overlap and make some great big sort of blue areas. So we probably want to move to a box plot because we got quite a lot of data in the subsamples or in the subgroups. And that's useful to know. And we're not really looking to make any observations of differences today. We're just looking at what the data is and you know, how much we've got. But the one thing that this does show is that one of the subgroups, Austria, has very little data, perhaps just 5 or 6 results. And in fact, I can use the brush function. I don't know if you've seen this, but some graphs allow you to brush them. So if I go to Editor, Brush, I can point at individual results, but I can also drag and click a square over the Austria results, and a brushing window appears, and it tells me the row numbers that those results are in. So we can see we've got 6 results from Austria. Now that's not very many. So quite often it might be that you would find yourself wanting to include or exclude a particular group. And in this case, we might want to exclude Austria from some of our future analyses from a statistical perspective because it doesn't have a lot of data. That's quite common. And there's a couple of different ways of doing this that I'm going to run you through. So firstly, if you want to exclude Austria from just a few analyses, then it's best to keep the data, but to use the include or exclude function that you'll find in all the graph data options. So I'm going to show you that now. So we're going to keep Austria in the data worksheet, but I'm going to go to graph, and this time we're going to do a box plot of the same data, 1Y with groups. Click OK, and I'm going to analyze the lead time hours. We're doing this the same as I did the individual value plot. I'm going to do it by country. Now, before I click OK, I have to exclude Austria from this one graph. And you do that because you find that all the graphs in Minitab have data options submenus. So if I go to data options, it allows me to include or exclude certain groups. Now, in this case, I want to exclude Austria. And I could define Austria by actually writing a condition, or actually there's an option to say exclude any brush rows. And I've got them brushed right now down here. So I could just click brush rows and it will exclude the Austria results from the box plot. But I'm going to do rows that match condition to achieve the same result. And in here I write the condition, and the condition is exclude anything where country equals Austria. And click OK, and OK, and OK again. And there we have it. That's the box plot of the same data, but Austria is not included in that data. So we've excluded it just from that one graph. And in fact, there's a note down here that says the results exclude the rows where country equals Austria. Okay, so that's excluding it temporarily. Now, what if you want to exclude Austria from most of your analyses? If you want to do that, then it's probably best to create a new worksheet that does not have Austria in it, so that you don't have to keep doing the data options submenu. So what we're going to do is go back to our worksheet, which has all the data. We're going to create a subset from that worksheet that has everything except Austria. Okay, so if we go to Data, Subset Worksheet, I'm going to take a subset where the rows match a condition. And then it asks me, do I want to include or exclude them? Well, I want to exclude them. And the one to look at is where the column, the country code, is, oh, sorry, I just want to go back here. I could identify creating a subset by using rows that match a condition. I could also, and I could write country equals Austria, or I could just use brushed rows from a graph, and I've still got Austria results brushed. So if I select that, it says, do you want to include or exclude the brushed rows? Well, I want to exclude them, and I want to call the new worksheet all data except Austria, and click OK. And there we have another worksheet without Austria in it. So now it's dead easy. You can go to all data if you want to include Austria, all data without Austria if you want to exclude it from a particular graph. Okay, so there are some ideas for working with groups of data. So we've covered issues around data stratification, including and excluding data from graphs, and how to create subset worksheets. So we've covered importing data, structuring it ready for analysis, creating some more data if you need to, and working with groups of data in Minitab and different ways of doing that. And I hope there's been some useful ideas in there for you, particularly in terms of helping you do more data preparation in Minitab rather than preparation in Excel. Now, before I hand over back to Evan, I'd like to quickly provide you with a little thank you for attending the live webinar today. As Evan mentioned at the beginning, I'm the author of a book called Lean, Six Sigma and Minitab, and this provides practical advice in a similar feel and approach to the approach that I've taken in this webinar today. As a thank you for attending this webinar live, we've set up an extra discount to give you 50% off our book, which you can order from our website at opexresources.com. This is only available through a week from now, just to cover the people that have attended live. So until the May 30th, you just need to enter the promo code Minitab50, that's down here, Minitab50, at checkout to purchase one copy at 50% off. So if you want to do that, please keep in mind that it will only work for 1 week, so do go ahead and do it soon if you want to. Okay, thank you, and now I'll hand you back to Evan for a bit, and then we'll cover any questions you might have.
All right, thank you so much, Quentin. That was great. So, as Quentin said, I want to cover a couple of things before we get to the Q&A portion here. I want to talk to you guys about the Insights Conference coming up September 12th through 14th. We can continue the conversation there. You can get ready to share your knowledge, expand your statistical analysis and quality improvement skills, and network. It'll be at the Scottsdale Resort at McCormick Ranch in Arizona. This is our 3rd annual conference, and we've seen more than 60 presentations from some of the brightest minds in the quality improvement and data analysis industries over the past 2 years. It just keeps getting better. You can also get expert advice in the Minitab lab. It's a hands-on lab experience there that'll help you master new skills and lead with new strategies and greater confidence to deliver results. New this year, we also have a user-centered design studio where our top software designers put you in the front seat to test drive our latest products. So you can give your feedback, talk about what features and capabilities you'd like to see next to help you run experiments, gain key insights, and work more efficiently. And you can see more information on the program and the speakers. We just released that at info.minitab.com/insights, as you can see there. And if you register before June 30th, we'll give you $100 off the full conference price. So now that I was able to put that plug in there, I want to give us a few more housekeeping notes again before I hand it back to Quentin for the Q&A. I want to remind you, go ahead and keep asking those questions in the questions pane and go to webinar. We've seen a lot of good ones so far. We'll also be sending you a few questions after the webinar, so we really appreciate it if you can take a couple minutes just to answer those 5 or 6 questions. And finally, again, this is being recorded, so if you need to drop off for whatever reason, or if you want to share this with your team or review it later, look out for that email. They'll be coming out, sending you the recording and the slides. So it looks like we have about 5 or 6 minutes left. Quentin, I'll go ahead and hand it back to you to field some of the questions here.
Okay. Thank you, Evan. I'll do my best. I'm just looking at some of the questions we've got. I'm going to scan through them, and I'm doing that real time, so just bear with me. So there are a few that aren't relevant questions around audio, etc. So I hope you heard that okay. Now let's just scroll forward. These were earlier on. Sorry about this. I'm just checking. Some of these aren't questions rather than comments. Are these options to import Excel sheets available only in Minitab 18? I think the new import screen for Excel was new to 18. I believe it might have been in 17. So again, I'm going to defer to the Minitab experts there. If you open an Excel file and you don't get presented with that intermediate screen, then clearly it's a Minitab 18 function. How were you able to arrange the project window to the side instead of the top of the screen? Right, okay, so I guess that's looking at when I use these shortcuts here. So when I do that, I get it automatically. If I click it once or twice, I get it automatically going to the left. I haven't seen it go to the top before. So again, that's probably an option or a question for Minitab technical support, but generally I've always had it default to the left-hand side. Okay, another question here, data formatting. Sometimes when I pull in date data, they come in as numbers. But when I format the Minitab column contain this data, yeah, okay, so now there is, it converts to 1905. How do I avoid this? Now there is something behind the scenes, and Excel does the same, where all dates and times are identified in decimal days from a date a long time ago, like 100 years ago or so, and probably around 1905. So that can create, that can be why sometimes if you've got a 0, you might end up with it reading 1905, because that is 0 from the perspective of dates in Excel and Minitab. Now, when they come in as numbers, it's possibly because you have some data in that column that isn't in date format. So if you've got something that Minitab doesn't recognize, then it probably won't recognize the whole column as date if it's got something in there that doesn't look like date. So again, I'd recommend that you take up Minitab's or offer of help. Their technical support is great. So if you have a situation like that sometimes, grab the data file, fire it over to them and give them a call. Another question here, what do you mean by data preparation? Well, I hope through the webinar that I've kind of explained that. What I'm talking about is very rarely we are able to just take the data and analyze it. It's ready to go. Quite often, if you ask a question like, I wonder if the lead times are different between, for example, the example I used, at different days of the week, then you've got to do some data preparation to get the data day of the week into a column so that you can divide by it. So that's what I mean by data preparation. It's very rare that your data is just ready to roll to answer any questions that you have. Okay, so what version of the Minitab is the presenter using? That was Minitab 18. Can Minitab worksheets be stacked if the data headers are not the same? It's going to, obviously if the data is not the same, it's not going to like that so much. It's actually taking the data, not the column heading. So I think that you need to be aware of that to make sure that all the column headings are the same. Otherwise, you're going to end up with different things in the column and everything recognized as numeric or text. So I don't know whether it would actually boot it out. You could try it, but I think you need to check that first. Okay, how much data can be loaded into Minitab without suffering performance issues? Well, in my experience, quite a bit. Pretty much the same as Excel. Just be careful of stratifying data. You can end up with a lot of different graphs sometimes. Okay, so what other questions do we have? Let's have a look. From the calculation of lead time in Excel, you would use the formula for network days. Yep, all of these things had equivalents in Excel. We were just trying to demonstrate some ways that you can actually do most things that you do in Excel in Minitab. There's an awful lot of functionality there. Okay, and let's just scroll down a couple. I think we're pretty close to the top of the hour. How can we check what file formats can or cannot be imported? Again, that would be a technical question for Minitab. So I'm sorry if I didn't get a chance to answer your particular question. We'll try to wrap up some of them after the webinar, but we're at the top of the hour, so I'm going to hand back to Evan to finish up.
Sure. Thanks again, Quentin. And yeah, as Quentin said here, we do capture all of your questions in GoToWebinar here. So if you didn't hear your question answered, we'll be getting back to you through GoToWebinar. Also, I want to mention again, we have that exit survey that'll pop up after GoToWebinar ends here. So that will also give you an opportunity if you'd like us to contact you about having a demo, or if you'd like to subscribe to our Minitab newsletter or keep updated on our Insights conference coming up in September. You'll be able to answer those questions there, and we'll be getting back to you. But yeah, it looks like our time is up. So on behalf of all of us at Minitab, I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. We appreciate you taking the time to join us today. And again, this is being recorded, so if you missed anything or if you want to review or share it later, look out for that email in the next few days where we'll send you the presentation and the recording. And yeah, I think that's about, oh, also I want to note here as well, you can head to minitab.com/support/videos for quick tutorials that'll help kind of back up some of the things that Quentin has presented here today as well. So that being said, I want to thank everybody for joining the Minitab Need to Knows Webinar 1, Managing Data in Minitab. I hope we see you for the following ones in June and July. And thanks again. Goodbye.